Hello, everyone. It's such an honor to be here in community with all of you today. I'm Jill Krakow-Zincraft, Interim Executive Director of the National Women's History Alliance, and I'm so thrilled to welcome you here to today's webinar, Moving Forward Together, Ways to Celebrate Women's History Month.
Minutes or 12
As
minutes.
we approach Women's History Month, we recognize that this is more than just a time to reflect on the past. It's an opportunity to inspire action, create meaningful connections, and celebrate the women who have shaped our today and that will continue to influence our tomorrow. Today's conversation is about how we can move forward together, ensuring that women's voices, achievements, and contributions are honored and amplified in all communities. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the exceptional individuals who serve on our board of directors and advisory committee. Their leadership has been instrumental in advancing the mission of NWHA, and their dedication makes it possible for us to continue this work. As we gather today, I am reminded of the power we each hold to drive this movement forward. Through education, advocacy, and storytelling, we shape the narrative and ensure that women's history remains a vital part of our shared history. And this work would not be possible without the visionaries who came before us, leaders who dedicated their lives to ensuring that women's contributions are recognized and celebrated. Few have done more to advance this cause than the woman I have the honor of introducing. Molly Murphy McGregor, our co-founder and former executive director, has dedicated over 45 years to advocating for the recognition of women's contributions to history. Her commitment was instrumental in establishing March as National Women's History Month, and her passion continues to inspire all generations. Please join me in welcoming the remarkable Molly Murphy McGregor. Molly, I just need you to unmute. Can you see?
Mute. Oh, okay. There we
You did
go.
it.
I'm unmuted. All right. Sorry about that. Uh, um, I still don't know exactly what this is, but okay. I'm just going to begin and say when we began our work to promote women's history in the late 1970s, I'm assuming many of you weren't even born, but let me tell you, at that time, it seemed that the history of women in the United States had been written in invisible ink. There were very few women history classes in the universities and colleges. And when we conducted student interviews in elementary and secondary schools, we discovered that very few students could identify even two women of acclaim, unless they were, of course, athletes or movie stars. The problem was for the teachers, it was even worse. They also demonstrated the same lack of knowledge. What was even more troubling was that teachers had little awareness of why the inclusion of women's history was so important. So as we began our work, we wanted to encourage teachers to understand the power of women's history and encouraging girls to see themselves as makers of history and to give boys more information about the female experience. From the beginning, we were accused of just making women's history up so that we would feel better about ourselves. Being female, about ourselves being female. Other assumptions were we wanted to promote women's history, we must hate men, and we were most likely radical feminists who wanted to destroy the family. The longest lasting of all the assumptions was that history is boring and uninteresting. And most significantly, especially as we face what we're facing today, is that it was unimportant. Because invisibility is the #1 form of bias, we work to have a Women's History Week established on our county school calendar. We want to give teachers the opportunity to, if they had never thought about it before, to talk about women. And we mistakenly assumed that there were resources out there that we could just gather together in this wonderful curriculum guide and hand it to the teachers with all these facts and dates about women, and it would go forth and it would be successful. Well, it was successful in lots of ways, but in other ways, we met with resistance. Probably not the level of resistance we're meeting with today, but that resistance is for a different level. Our resistance was that these teachers thought we made this up. They said, this couldn't have happened. I never knew about it. How come I didn't know about it? And so at the time, this is prior to the internet, but we did have our local library on speed dial, and that helped a lot. So we were successful in getting Women's History Week into the school calendar, and we selected March 8th, International Women's Day, as the focal date of the week for 3 reasons. We wanted to stress a multicultural perspective in telling American women's stories. We needed to challenge the idea that when we talked about women's history, we were only talking about white women's history. We wanted to recognize that international connection between and among all women. And we wanted to acknowledge the work of women in the home and in the paid labor force. To encourage teachers to use the week to discuss women's history, we provided what I said was a curriculum guide. Although when you look at the massive resources that are now available on the school, on the web, it's pathetic. What we at the time, there was only one school district in all of the United States that even celebrated anything about women, and that was in Berkeley, California. So we have that curriculum guide to this day as one of our artifacts, and I'm really happy that I can say it's just an artifact. It's not filled with the incredible information that now exists throughout the internet. I hope that all of you will take the time to spend a lot of time on our website and visit our partners, because each of them have developed extraordinary, active, fun-filled ways to make women's life, women's history come alive. There's 4 main things I wanted to remind all of you about women's history, because it's one of the things that very often get overlooked. First of all, as I said, invisibility is the #1 form of bias. That's why having it on a school calendar, having International Women's Day, having specific holidays helps focus. And given the world we live in today, we know we need as much focus as always. And having it on the calendar, I love it every year when the AP and all these people ask me, is Women's History Month going to really be March 1st through 31st? And I think, yes, sir, it is. Okay. The other thing I want to remind people is that if you're reading something, you need to assume that in any culture at any time in human history, women have made major contributions. So if you are reading something that isn't inclusive in that way, know that there's more work that needs to be done. The assumption forever was that women hadn't done anything. And sometimes, I don't know if they do it on purpose or if it's just because they don't want to face the fact that, civilization was built by women and men, but we still come up with this today, just not at the same level. And instead, I think we come up with a level of fear. Somehow they think that maybe women have had too many privileges, and we should deal with that. Oh, okay. I won't get into that because you all know what we're living through. You all know the work we have to do. And I hope you also know that we have a new sense of urgency. It's never been more urgent to communicate with people. Someone asked me, what can we do? And I said, listen. But what I meant was listen and engage. In the olden days, there was a time when I might have just been confrontational with people when they say something that was sexist, racist, or homophobic. Today, instead, I try and ask them, what do they mean? And try and draw out a dialogue, a conversation, because most people, they just don't know. They really don't know what they're talking about. And so rather than put them up against the wall of, they're bad and I'm right, instead, we need to engage them, ask them questions, and help them move forward. The last thing I wanted to say is the question determines the answer. When I taught college women's history, I said to my students at the beginning of the semester, I said, I can tell you right now one of the questions that will be on the finals, and it will be, in what year were women given the vote? And if you say to me, oh, women were given the vote in 1920, then you have failed this class, because the importance of listening to what the question is. Women were never given the vote, and the idea of given dismisses the 72 years of pauseless campaigning. So those are things for us to really be thinking about. Invisibility, the importance of the question determining the answer, the fact that all women of all cultures have made major contributions, and finally, the teacher is the key. And by that, I mean, you're the key. It's the way you approach it. It's the way we engage people. And we live at a time when we really need to engage each other and connect and let each other know that we're listening, but we need to dialogue things. I'm not saying we're going to hear these horrendous things and say, oh, yeah, that's true. No, no. What I'm saying is what we need to keep asking people is, why would you say that? Why do you think that? Where does that come from? So that, all I can say is we've come a long way, and you all know we have a long, long way to go. But I want to celebrate the literally hundreds of thousands of people throughout this country and the world that are really bringing women's lives forward, are giving us the kind of inspiration that we need during these very difficult and challenging times. So I know together our history is our strength, and I appreciate you being here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Molly. And Molly reminds me, I don't believe I say it enough to you, but thank you. Thank you for just being you and all you've done. Okay. And now I am so honored to introduce Caitlin Caligera, who's a licensed tour guide, author, and entrepreneur. Caitlin founded a tour of her own, which is the first women's history tourism country in Washington, D.C. Passionate about education beyond the classroom, she elevates women's stories through historical tours, events, and her book, 101 Places in Women's History That You Must Not Miss. So please join me in welcoming Caitlin.
Thank you so much, Jill. I'm so excited to be part of this program. I'm such a fan of the National Women's History Alliance and all the work that you do. And I am a big fan of Molly, and it's an honor to follow her in this presentation. So I want to echo a lot of the message that has been shared already, which is mostly one of celebration. Let's take this opportunity during this program to think about how we can recognize and celebrate women's history in various ways. Part of my work is focusing on meeting people where they are, right? Meeting people where they're at. And I think that tourism is an opportunity to do that. So before I get into the heart of it too much, let me just do an introduction and tell you some more about my work here. I'm a small business owner based in Washington, D.C. You can see my logo right there, A Tour of Her Own. That's a reference to A League of Their Own, if anyone's ever seen that movie, one of my favorites. And we have a little nickname, it's Toho. So feel free to say Toho as you talk about our company here. I'm the sole owner of this company, but I do have several other tour guides who work with me, and we try to develop tours that, as Molly was saying, really focus on not just women's history as one, but women's histories, right? All the different experiences, all the different contributions and challenges that many different women from different backgrounds have left with us. So another point just to mention, I am an author. I wrote a book titled 111 Places in Women's History That You Must Not Miss in Washington, D.C. So my work is very place-based, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as well. But in just a minute, we'll go to the next slide. You'll see a couple QR codes throughout. If you want to QR code and scan into the website, you can go ahead and do that. Otherwise, you'll have that opportunity later on. So I tried to break this down into 3 easy keywords, 3 easy ways that we can share women's history. The first, places, the second, classrooms, and the third is home, in your house. And I'm going to get a little bit more into what each of this means. I would love to start with giving you a little bit of background about how I got here, because I think it's we're trying to connect generations here. I didn't really study women's history until later on in life, until this became a career. I don't really remember learning too much women's history in school. My entry point into this world was through athletics. I played softball growing up, and this was my passion. This was my identity in many ways. And I learned about Title IX, right? Something that came right out of the 70s that impacted women, impacted our opportunity to participate, to learn our stories, to learn where our challenges are. So I was so lucky to have coaches that taught me about that. And I always kind of thought that was my starting point, and it created this curiosity for me. So now, so much of that is poured into my work, not just history, but advocacy, activism, making sure that we can kind of infiltrate all these spaces in really positive ways. Now, places, this could mean many things. If you've ever visited Washington, D.C., or let's even say New York City, where I happen to be right now, we love to see representation of women, primarily in statues or in museums, right? This was, it was and is my main focus with my tours. Visibility. Where can we find women in public places? And I wrote down this quote that Molly had said, and I'm going to be thinking about it for weeks now, years maybe. Molly said, invisibility is the #1 form of bias. And I couldn't agree more. In my perspective as a tour guide, visibility or invisibility shows up on the National Mall, where there are barely any statues representing women. I was leading tours and often talking about the things that I saw, which were memorials to President Abraham Lincoln and George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Martin Luther King Jr. and Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And those stories and those spaces are incredible, and they have a place on our tours. Absolutely. No one's trying to erase that history. It's just that when we talk about presidents, we also want to talk about first ladies, right? We want to talk about their stories together, weave them in to a broader picture. And so as I was moving about the National Mall and Washington, D.C., I noticed that representation was lacking. Like, where are the women? And that's how this work started. So I'm constantly looking for that representation in places. And I would encourage you to do the same thing. You can celebrate by going to look for women's history. Now, I'll be honest, you're probably not going to find a 555-foot obelisk in the middle of the nation's capital representing a woman. That's just not often how it works. But we do have some statues. So for instance, on the National Mall, we have the Vietnam veterans, the women Vietnam veterans statue. So often you have to get a little creative and a little interpretive with where you look. I always love looking in hidden places to find women's history. A couple examples are parks and gardens. Women are often preserving this space. Women are often giving, planting and giving color and giving life to these green spaces. Also plaques, right, on buildings or names of buildings or street names or sometimes airport names or train names, train station names. So go look for these places and also try to find places in your community where you can support their programming. I'm so fortunate and lucky to have access to the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., but I know we all don't have that. That's okay. Find a museum in your neighborhood, find a library, a theater that is putting on a performance about women's history, and go and support that place. And if those places don't exist, look on the internet, look internationally. You can donate with your money or you can donate with your time by showing up, right? I'm going to move ahead and go into classrooms. I'm going to spend a little bit of time here. In full transparency, I was not a great student in school. As an athlete, I was someone that needed to be moving around a lot. I couldn't sit still. About a 10-minute Zoom presentation is about my limit here. So I actually, my work is outside the classroom, but I have the utmost respect for teachers and for our young people, our students who spend so much time, right, within four walls in the classroom, within the education system. So we all can't be walk into a classroom and help, but we can donate materials, we can donate books, right? Go ask a teacher in your community, in your family, how can I help? What can I do to support your work in the classroom? Because above all, we need to reach young people. And I'm going to move on to some of my favorite one here. This is my best advice. Where can we best share women's history? Honestly, in your home. Share your history. If you are a woman, share your story with your daughter, your son, your grandkids. Don't only tell them that. That's important. That's oral history. Fantastic. Love it. But we need to record it as well. You can ask them to interview you on a video like this, right? Everyone has a phone these days. You can write your story down. If you're not comfortable saying it, write it down and pass it on to your family or write individual notes to your kids. You might not think that your story is spectacular. Maybe you do. Either way, I can assure you that it is. You can tell them where you worked, what your feeling was in school, right? Some of your favorite things, your favorite literature. Record all of that so that they have it. And if you're maybe a gentleman that's with us tonight or a young person, ask those people in your family for their story. Go ask your grandmother, go ask your mom, right? Go ask your sister and bring those stories to the surface because when we feel connected to this history, it becomes personal. And all of a sudden we can say, I know my mom's story, and somehow this connects to a broader American history story. So go ahead and celebrate Women's History Month and actually do these things all year round. And I think that will put us all in a really healthy and progressive place as we continue to represent and celebrate women. So I will pause there, and I think we have a couple giveaways actually. So I'll pass this back to Jill. I'm happy to give away one autographed book. I'll ship it to you. And then actually we're going to give away a virtual tour as well for a group, an organization, you and your friends, whoever wins it.
Okay. Caitlin, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, everyone, this is the Wheel of Names. If you've registered, you are on here. Caitlin, you'll keep track of the two people that win?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's do the book first.
Okay, here we go.
EM.
And I will get you the corresponding email address to that.
Perfect. Congratulations, EMM. Sure. Donna Smith. Okay, congratulations. We will be in contact. I'd just like to end and just say thank you again to the National Women's History Alliance. Jill, Molly, appreciate it.
Caitlin, thank you so much. What a great presentation. Okay, well, I am so honored to introduce Janice Robinson Daly, who is a passionate advocate for women's history. Janice is a best-selling historical fiction author whose novels, The Unlocked Path and The Path Beneath Her Feet, celebrate early women doctors. A sought-after speaker, she is presented at the Historical Novel Society, AAUW, and the American Medical Women's Association. Her hashtag 31 Titles Women in History initiative is widely recognized for celebrating Women's History Month. So please join me in welcoming Janice.
Thank you so much, Jill, and thank you to Molly as well, who I first met a couple of years ago now when I started this whole program. Delighted to be here with you tonight, and just want to take a few moments to share some information about my program celebrating Women's History Month. When I started my first novel, and really as a discovery that was women's medical colleges, specifically opened in 1850, the first one in Pennsylvania, because women were denied admission to almost every medical school in the country and around the world. So we are very fortunate that some forward-thinking men and women started these women's medical colleges. And that was the inspiration for me writing my first book, The Unlocked Path. And then as I got into my research and thinking about all the other women in history whose stories have not been told, as Molly mentioned, they were written in invisible ink. Well, luckily, there are many other authors like myself who apparently have found maybe it's the old homemade myth recipe of drinking some lemon juice over that invisible ink, and we brought those stories forward to pages now in the form of historical fiction books. And so I became engrossed with this idea of let's bring those books forward to more people and let's celebrate the stories that are finally being told in the genre of historical fiction, which I think will reach more readers instead of just textbooks, and probably textbooks that weren't even going to get into classrooms anyway. So my project became 31 titles to read to celebrate women in history. This is my third year running the program, and as you can see, it's a wide variety of books. But at the core, all of them are celebrating women, either collectively as a group, doing specific things, such as the Vietnam War nurses, told in Kristen Hanna's blockbuster book, The Women, and recognizing the authors that have written in ink or typed on pages these stories. And so what I have done is created this list and am now distributing it in many different ways as a key method to help more people celebrate Women's History Month. It is first and foremost and most easily accessed through my website. It can be downloaded. Feel free to download it, share it, investigate the stories, read about the books, read about the subjects in the books, and I bet you will learn quite a bit. I also wanted to appreciate and honor the women authors who are writing these stories. And so when I was developing the list, I wanted to look at also, the quality of the writing. So they're rating reviews. And I also wanted to take special moments to consider the subject of the book and making sure that we were being well represented with diverse voices, both in the subject of the book, their cultural identity, the time period, because we know women have been doing amazing works throughout history. So going all the way back to ancient times and all the way forward to like the Vietnam War. And then the author's cultural identity as well was important to find diversity there. And even thinking about the diverse ways that authors are getting published today. Many of the books on my list are not just from the top big five publishing houses, because some of these stories are coming from independent presses or even self-published. And they still deserve the recognition of getting that women's history out there to more readers. So these are my lists on the screen here from 2023 and 2024. All of them are listed on my website, including the downloadable for this year. So that's the first way that you could access the information and learn more about these books. However, I also have available a 1 hour event that I go out either in person or over Zoom and spend a little bit more time reviewing and previewing each individual title. I am connected with all the other authors on my list. So many times I've actually done some joint presentations. 2 years ago, I was down at the Atlanta Library with author Piper Hughley, who wrote by her own design about the fashion designer Anne Lowe. Piper is back on my list this year with a fabulous book, American Daughters, about Alice Roosevelt and her friendship with Portia Washington, the daughter of Booker T. Washington. So we can do in-person events, we can do Zoom events, and we can even have fun. Where we can bring in a local bookseller and sell those books and get them immediately into the hands of readers. I have even a fun little bingo game that I've put together, complete with prizes. So it's just another way to bring those stories forward. I am already scheduled with many library events and many Zoom events for the month of March. I do still have a few openings in my calendar as well. But just to give you an idea what the presentation looks like, I highlight the book, give a quick overview of what the book is about, and then the subject of the book. So Harlem Rhapsody, that just came out 2 weeks ago from the amazing author Victoria Christopher Murray, is the story of Jessie Redmond Faucett. And if anyone doesn't know who Jessie is, you will learn that she was the editor of the Crisis magazine and part of the Harlem Renaissance. She discovered Langston Hughes, the poet, amazing work and all of his work. And it wasn't for Jessie, we may never have been able to be privileged to read his amazing poetry. So that is a quick example of what some of the presentation looks like. Individual subjects in the books, of course, my books are on here because I'm celebrating early women doctors. And in The Path Beneath Her Feet, I bring forward the valuable information of letting people know about the existence of the American Women's Hospital Unit, who in the 1930s and 40s went to rural America and brought health care to those healthcare deserts, which unfortunately are coming back again today. So hoping that we can learn from our history as well. And then my bingo game. We just have a lot of fun with that at the in-person events and give away some cute prizes. So it is an opportunity for Zoom or in person. I do have a few openings still available for this March, but for those early planners wanting to think about 2026, it's not too late to think about that now, because I can guarantee you I will be back year 4 with another new list, and I know I will find another set of 31 amazing books to read for Women's History Month. I'd also just like to put out a thought to any educators that are on the call tonight. You know, we were talking about the curriculum guides and how important it is to try to find curriculum that supports Women's History Month. Well, think about literature. Think about in a study of the Vietnam War, maybe read a few chapters from the women it really will personalize and bring those experiences and those events to life for students, way more than just the facts that we might find in our history books. So I have other information that can be found on my website as well, and definitely would love to fill my calendar in March with as many presentations as possible to get this word out. Jill, I didn't know if we were doing my giveaway now or if you wanted to wait until the end.
Oh, I think we should do it now.
Okay,
All right.
so I am giving away tonight a gift card, a $25 gift card to the winner's choice of either Amazon or bookshop.org. Bookshop.org supports independent bookstores across the country. And $25 hopefully will go a little way towards helping you pick one book off of the list to get started with the celebration.
Yeah, thank you for doing this. Okay, I'm gonna spin the wheel and you'll keep track of the name.
Marty Musser. Congratulations, Marty. I look forward to connecting with you and getting a e-gift card into your hands and a great book onto your shelves.
Thank you, Janice. And thank you for your presentation. Janice, you're going to stay pinned. And Helene, if you could bring back Caitlin and Molly. We have a couple of questions. Also, everyone, we have a few minutes for questions before we wrap up. If you raise your hand, we'll ask you to unmute and you can ask the panelists yourselves. So while we're waiting for that, I have a question that came through for all of you. What inspired you to start or become involved in your initiative, and how has it evolved over time? What changes have you seen?
Well, I spoke a little bit to it that, first and foremost, I mean, look, I was looking for another creative way to get word out about my book. But then I also paused to think about that idea of the community that exists among women writers. And it's amazing, the community that's out there and the way that we do support each other. So my goal really with developing my list was to promote 30 other authors as much as it was to bring forward the women's history that we were doing. And in terms of it involving, year one, it was just the list. I just got it out there and I did a couple of presentations. Last year, I did more presentations and moved over to a couple of Zoom and a couple of other joint presentations. This year, we are going all in and we are actually each putting in a few dollars and we're doing some paid marketing, advertising opportunities as well to help further expand the reach of the program.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Janice. How about you, Caitlin?
I'm sorry, Jill, what did you just say?
Oh, Molly,
Uh-huh.
what sparked your interest? And then we'll
Well,
turn it over to Caitlin. What sparked your
I'm
interest?
sorry. Okay. I'm sorry I'm one behind. What sparked my interest was my extraordinary lack of knowledge. I was teaching high school and one of my students asked me, what is the women's movement? 1972, Shirley Chisholm ran for president of the United States. Barbara Jordan was elected to Congress. The beginning of Title IX was written. Ms. Magazine was published. I was a female social studies teacher and married. And yet, did I even begin to understand that the only reason I was standing in that classroom trying to so-called educate my students was because of all the work of all the generations that had preceded me. And so that was my conversion experience. I went home, my sacred textbook, Seneca Falls Convention, and my greatest regret was that my mother was no longer alive, and I so wanted to ask her about her history. And my work has been dedicated to her and to women like her ever since, because the enrichment that comes to your life from knowing our history is just extraordinary.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Molly. And Caitlin.
Yeah, I've been inspired by several different topics here. I think first and foremost, travel. I'm a little bit of an addict to traveling and had the opportunity to go to different places in different countries throughout my 20s. When we travel, we can see many different perspectives and often question or challenge our own perspective. And so, being based in DC, I wanted to be able to offer that to my guests, to my tour guests. Beyond that, I was became a tour guide in 2015, and in the first 2 or 3 years, I was doing standard tours, so Arlington Cemetery, Capitol, White House. Then around that time, there were some really, I think, important current events that were happening that pushed me into exploring women's history. 2016 and 2017, we saw Hillary Clinton run for president. We saw the Women's March come to Washington, D.C. with hundreds of thousands. We saw the Me Too and Time's Up movements, and we also saw the women's national soccer team doing a huge push for equal pay. So I was watching a lot of this unfold, and it inspired me to engage with my activism, but through a historical outlet. And so I'm grateful that I'm able to do that. And those were some of my main inspirations.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, all three of you. Helene, could you unmute Sue? Okay, Sue, you can speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, hi. My question is for Janice. My 17-year-old granddaughter has wanted to be a doctor since she was 12. What would be the best book to get her to educate her on what a privilege she has and what's happened to the women before her? Thank you. All of you had very interesting topics. I appreciate all
Thank
of you.
you, Sue. Well, Sue, you're not a plant. I didn't connect with you beforehand because, of course, I would say the unlocked path.
The
Uh,
unlocked path.
but no, that is historical fiction and does talk about the trials and the challenges that women, particularly in that time period, went through when less than 5% of all of our doctors were women. Now we're up to about 37%, but good news for your granddaughter, over 51% of our medical students today now are women. So they're coming on strong. The other book, though, for nonfiction, I would recommend is Doctors Blackwell by another Janice, actually, Janice with an ICE, Nimora. And that is a story of Elizabeth Blackwell, who was the first woman to receive a medical degree. She
Oh.
was able to gain admittance to Geneva College in upstate New York as a special student. So those would be a couple of the books that I would recommend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, there is a question in the chat that says, we're hosting a month-long event with 4 Fridays of presentations from local accomplished and diverse women. In these precarious times, we feel the need to fully embrace this month as well as upcoming Juneteenth and our Community Pride Festival. Do you have any ideas for takeaways for attendees as far as inspiration, keeping the fight up, or reflections on why recognizing women's progress is imperative at this moment in time? Well, Molly.
Yeah, we'll have a lot of things to say, but I can't function with this thing very well. I don't think there's ever been a more urgent time, and I think that I'm so glad you're going to do four presentations because there seems to be this group in Washington that thinks that they can decide whether or not we are going to celebrate, recognize, and be joyful about our diversity. So what I would say in terms of of takeaways that if there's specific things that happen during that particular session, as Janice was saying, there's resource, there's books. I think we really need to give people something that they can do. Of course, we have a toolkit on our website, as do lots of other websites. But I do think that if you give people, and here's one of the ideas, I would always consider reminding them to give the gift of women's history. And by that, I mean, no matter how young the child is, male, female, how important it is to give them books about the accomplishments of women, of all women, because how else are they going to possibly know? So I don't, that's what I would say, but I would say give them something to walk away with. Even if it's, you visited a website that you think is just remarkable, give them information about that website so they can share that with you.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Caitlin.
Yeah, I'd like to also answer part of that question, primarily because Pride was answered, and I identify in the LGBTQ community, so I want to share two perspectives here. Also in Washington, D.C. this year, we are hosting World Pride, which is major. It changes countries like every 2 years, so there's going to be millions and millions of people here in D.C., which is excellent. I think we are moving into a time, and this is true really always, but for instance, the LGBTQ community will be celebrating and educating and also protecting ourselves. We, just like we do in women's history, have to prevent ourselves from burnout. We have to make sure we know where our boundaries are. And so, I share that because it's also important for allies, for other people to help educate, to help share stories. I want, like, often say, people say to me, I want to come on your tour with my daughter. And I say, that's great. How about you bring your son also, right? Because we want the boys and the men or allies in any group, if you're talking about Black history, right? You want white folks to share this history in a respectable way, or at least honor it or buy your products. So as we move through these moments, I think we need to celebrate, but also recognize that there's a lot of emotion and protection happening as well, and be sensitive and mindful of that while we get the word out.
And I would just offer up, if you know of a story, if you know of a woman in history whose story hasn't been told, tell it, or better yet, suggest it to an author. Take a list at all the amazing authors on my list and send them a note. Hey, maybe you might be interested in writing this story that will help get her information, her accomplishments and achievements out to a wider audience. Because otherwise, sometimes we're just stumbling upon these stories by pure happenstance, which is what happened with me. So if you have a suggestion, absolutely. You can get in touch with any author through their website.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciated the thoughtfulness to all those answers to those questions. And if we didn't get to your question, I have them and I will put them out to the panelists and we will get back to you. And so now I'm going to turn the program over to our board president, Martha Wheelock. Welcome.
Hi, thank you all for coming today. And panelists, you were just remarkable. You took away everything I might have said about why we should celebrate women's history. Molly brought up the fact that knowing women's stories and knowing what they have done erases or at least contributes to the reduction of bias. And I would also add to that it adds to the visibility of what women can do. And when we see more women as presidents, whatnot, we establish a trust in women. And there's a lot of ways that we can just, as Caitlin said, make women a focus for us this month and all months. Like, I go into the bank and I ask, "Do you have a Susan B. Anthony dollar?" do you have a Susan, do you have some of the women quarters? And they say, if they say no or whatever, they give it to me. I say her name, ask if they know who she is. And I become a little educator on the run. Another one is ask your smart speaker to play Ella Fitzgerald and enjoy that. Just celebrate the kind of inherited excellence and power you have as a woman, and tell your stories. I love Caitlin's idea of finding them in your family, about great Aunt Tilly and what she did at the mills in Lawrence, Massachusetts. These are priceless. The little ordinary stories are not ordinary. They're extraordinary. They're spectacular. And we just need to have them out there and share them and have tea with your friend and tell her something you learned today. I think that those are really good examples. I don't think I have enough time to tell a wonderful story about two women who kept sneaking into the lab in Michigan to develop a vaccination for whooping cough. They said, "Oh no, you girls get out of here. You're not supposed to be here." They snuck out in night and developed it, and then they brought it back to their kitchen, and they developed it in 1930 and saved 4,000 lives. They gave themselves the vaccination, and they worked with mothers and people, their children, to get that. Their names were Pearl Kendrick and Grace Elderly. And we celebrate them today because there's now a new measles, and maybe women will have some choice to be partake of that. And please join us in your membership that you can join at no cost, just to keep us going here. And we honor your presence, and we love you, and thank you for celebrating with us. Bye.
Well, wait, Martha, we're gonna
Oh,
we
yeah,
have 3 giveaways for
we have giveaways.
we do for Women's History Month kits. And so, Martha, if I spin the wheel, will you be able to write down?
Yep.
Great, thank you. Okay, everyone. Molly will send out 3 Women's History kits. Just in time for Women's History Month. Okay. Martha, can you see my screen?
I can?
Okay, good. Okay,
Molly Penny.
congratulations.
Hey, Molly. Susan Ottoman.
Great, thank you. Congratulations, Susan. And Catherine Wall.
Catherine Wall. Thank
All
you.
right, congratulations, everyone.
And thanks for
We're gonna-
coming.
We're going to close out the program with a short slideshow, and thank you, everyone.